To understand a nation, you first have to look at the ground beneath it. On one side of the Indian subcontinent, you have vibrating, hyper-fertile agricultural zones, pulling millions of tons of food from the earth. On the other, utterly still, sun-baked deserts that actively repel human settlement. When you lay the demographic data over that landscape, the disparity becomes a math problem. The population density spikes into massive, clustered heat maps across the north and east, while vast stretches of the west and center remain almost entirely dark. Now, switch the view from human density to regional rainfall and crop yield. The maps are identical. India supports nearly a fifth of humanity, but it forces them into highly specific, geographically mandated corridors. We often talk about this immense geographic variation using the language of tourism, framing it as a backdrop for cultural richness and aesthetic beauty. But for the people actually tasked with running the country, policymakers, engineers, and administrators, that diversity is a strict ledger of physical constraints and economic multipliers. Strip away the borders, the cities, and the census numbers, and you are left with the raw terrain that dictates all of those outcomes. You see towering northern mountains dropping violently into flat plains, which then give way to an elevated southern plateau. To actually master the internal dynamics and the geopolitics of India, you have to reverse engineer this terrain from first principles. That means following the causal chain straight down the line. We need to look at how tectonic genesis controls the distribution of water, and how that water dictates human settlement patterns. The entire chain reaction starts with a single event that occurred 50 million years ago. The economic destiny and sheer demographic scale of over 1 billion modern lives were essentially pre-programmed by the slow-motion collision of ancient landmasses. Wind the clock back. The Indian landmass was part of a supercontinent called Gondwana. It broke away and began accelerating northward across the ocean. It eventually slammed directly into the massive Eurasian plate. The land caught between them had nowhere to go but up. The immense kinetic energy crumpled the rock, creating massive folded layers of earth. Those crumples are the Himalayas. Geologically speaking, they are young, highly volatile fold mountains, meaning the tectonic engine beneath them is still actively pushing them higher. They are structured in 3 main tiers. At the very top is the Himadri, the Greater Himalayas. It's a zone of staggering elevation and permanent deep snow. Life here is nearly impossible. Just south of that is the Himachal, the Lower Himalayas. The drop in altitude creates a moderate climate, allowing dense biodiversity and entire human settlements adapting perfectly to the steep terraced slopes. The geopolitical weight of the Himalayas lies in their dual function as a climate control system and the primary water tower for the subcontinent. First, the mountains act as a massive physical shield against frigid winds from Central Asia. Second, they trap moisture-heavy southwest monsoon winds from the ocean. The rock wall forces them upward, rapidly cooling the air and triggering immense concentrated rainfall and snow. All that trapped precipitation forms massive high-altitude glaciers. These ice reserves act as giant, slow-release reservoirs that guarantee a constant flow of water year-round. But because the region is geologically young, that water sits in a highly volatile zone. The constant seismic shifting makes the area uniquely prone to sudden glacial lake outburst floods. The Himalayas are a high-risk, high-reward tectonic engine. They guarantee the physical survival of the subcontinent while subjecting it to a permanent state of geological threat. Gravity then takes over. The melting ice carves deep, fast-moving valleys as it drops out of the Himadri. Think of rivers like the Ganga and Indus as massive industrial conveyor belts. Rushing water violently scrapes the rock face, loading the river with rich minerals. Hitting the flat depression below, it loses momentum, dumping that crushed sediment onto the ground. Over millennia, this continuous deposition created the northern Gangetic Plains. It is, by definition, a geographically engineered alluvial sink. This continuous delivery of fresh water and mineral-rich topsoil creates an exceptionally forgiving environment. It allows for reliable multicropping, meaning you can grow abundant food season after season with very little resistance from the earth. That raw agricultural carrying capacity is the exact reason this specific zone became the cradle of Indian civilization. Furthermore, building across a completely flat surface is cheap and fast. Extensive road and railway networks were easily rolled out over the plains, compounding economic growth by seamlessly connecting those agricultural yields to massive markets. But the math cuts both ways. The entire system relies heavily on the precise timing of the monsoons and upstream Himalayan runoff. When the volume exceeds the capacity of the plains, the result is catastrophic, systemic flooding that overwhelms infrastructure. The Gangetic Plains won the geographic lottery. They act as a giant conversion engine, taking tectonic runoff and translating it directly into the sheer demographic weight of modern India. Move directly south, and the rules of the board change entirely. You hit the vast triangular mass of the Peninsular Plateau. Unlike the crumpled, volatile mountains in the north, this is an ancient continental shield. It is geologically old, deeply settled, and highly stable. Topographically, it is a raised, relatively flat surface, bordered on its edges by steep, abrupt slopes known as the Ghats. This creates a critical analytical difference in how the region operates, specifically regarding its water security. Because there is no glacial ice here, the rivers of the Peninsular Plateau are completely rain-fed and seasonal, lacking the permanent backup of the north. But there is a massive economic trade-off. What the plateau lacks in guaranteed year-round water, it makes up for as the nation's primary vault. The ancient rock is packed with the raw mineral wealth required for heavy industry. Moving west, we encounter the subcontinent's most extreme anomaly, the arid expanse of the Thar Desert. This region is a study in geographic failure. The Aravalli range is aligned perfectly parallel to the southwest monsoon winds. Because the winds aren't forced upward to cool, they slide straight past without dropping their moisture, leaving the region starved of water. However, this arid zone is highly functional. Extreme heat, cold nights, and a lack of water turn it into a formidable natural barrier. Historically, this hostile terrain effectively protected the subcontinent's western flank, actively deterring military incursions. The southern plateau and the western desert operate on an entirely different set of rules from the volatile north. Together, they provide the hard, stable, defensive, and economic bedrock of the nation. When you pull all the way back, the Indian subcontinent reveals itself as a single, integrated geoeconomic machine. The ancient stability of the peninsular shield provides the heavy industrial minerals. The violent, volatile Himalayan collision guarantees the water supply, and the depressed northern plains reliably translate that water into food security. But this creates an uncomfortable administrative reality. Because this framework is physically hard-coded into the bedrock, extreme regional inequality is a guaranteed mathematical feature of the system. This dictates why highly centralized, one-size-fits-all policy solutions almost always fail in a landscape this fragmented. If you design an agricultural subsidy or an infrastructure standard optimized for the flat, water-rich Gangetic Basin, it is mathematically doomed the moment you try to apply it to the steep grades of the Himalayas or the arid dunes of the Thar. This geography functions as an active force, constantly shaping and limiting economic output. True mastery of statecraft, environmental planning, and internal security requires accepting the constraints of the terrain. You cannot play the game until you understand the tectonic rules of the board